I'm not 100%. At the time, I was not 100% of what those services were because Valerie had made that negotiation with him.
All right. And as a matter of fact, at the time the money was paid, were you present or were you out of the room?
I was present, but I did not hand him the money. It was on the table covered by some laundry.
At some point in time, there was a discussion that's been testified to you, or by you, not by you, but by the undercover officer about the discussion that he had with Valerie about her ex. Recall that?
I do.
And did you participate in that discussion?
I did not.
What did you exactly do to extract yourself from that conversation?
I left the table. I was previous to them talking, them even coming to the restaurant, Valerie had said she wanted to talk to Aziz and the guy will be called Adam. We met as Adam by herself. And that she said that when she wanted to talk to them, that she'd ask me to leave the restaurant.
And did you?
I did.
Did you actually leave the restaurant, or did you just leave the table? And
No, I left the physical space. I went out into the parking lot.
all right. If I may have a moment, Judge.
Briefly, please.
You've heard some testimony here that you had conversations with the undercover officer Duran about wanting to kill Megan and McDaniel.
That's correct.
All right. Tell us your recollection of the content of those conversations, if they in fact occurred.
Well, I can't really give you a recollection of something that didn't happen. I never asked anybody to kill anybody.
Does the word kill, hurt, harm, in any way, shape, or form appear in any of those recorded conversations?
Not on my behalf.
I'm sorry?
Except for to exclude them from things I want done. I never asked to have anybody hurt, killed, harmed, kidnapped, or I never asked for anybody to be in any way physically hurt.
Did you pay money at all for this purpose?
No.
All right.
Well, there was no purpose for me to pay money towards anybody being hurt because I never asked for that.
Now, we've heard testimony about there being money that had been, I believe, transmitted to Megan or to the undercover officer. What was the purpose of giving the money to the undercover officer as far as Megan's concerned?
It had nothing to do with Megan at all.
All right. Who did it have to deal with?
It had to do with an advance payment on what Valerie and the undercover officer had agreed upon because of expenses that he needed to hotel and whatnot. For the time that he was there, he had explained to me that, well,
Don't object, this is going into hearsay.
It had nothing to do with monies to Megan for her expenses to leave, correct?
no, that it had been paid previously to Aziz.
And how much money was paid to Aziz?
He was given initially a $2,500 payment for the initial investigation that I had hired him to do. He was given an additional $5,000 for continued expenses during that investigation. he was given a little over $5,000 for a moving company receipt that he had showed me, that had arranged for Megan's stuff to be moved back to Pittsburgh. He had given me a receipt for a Continental Airlines ticket, first class one way, that was a little over 700 and change. I gave him $1,000 for that. And then he had told me that he thought it was appropriate to give Megan some money to restart her life in Pittsburgh, and I asked him how much, and the sum of $10,000 in cash was agreed upon, which he received.
And the 10,000 went to Aziz as opposed to Megan?
That was how it was arranged, yes. I was under the impression that Aziz was in contact with Megan on a semi-regular basis.
Well, but my question is, was the money given to Aziz for Aziz or to be given to Megan?
It was to be given to Megan. The monies that were given to Aziz for Aziz were the initial $2,500 that he received, plus the additional $5,000 for what I thought were his services.
Do you know if, in fact, he gave money to Megan for this purpose?
I have learned in testimony that we've heard in court that that did not occur.
Did what?
It did not occur. Do you want me to rephrase my... I've learned during testimony and during the course of this entire process that, in fact, Aziz had never even spoken to Megan, and therefore she never received any of these monies that were supposed to go to her.
All right. Did you ever pay money to an undercover officer for the purpose of harming or hurting either Megan or McDaniel?
No.
Did you ever discuss that issue with the undercover officer?
We had, yes, we had multiple discussions or multiple conversations about not wanting to harm or hurt anybody.
And that was something that you had expressed, correct?
Repeatedly.
All right. And as a matter of fact, this jury's heard testimony where you in a conversation talked about, I don't want anybody hurt, I don't want anybody harmed, things of this fashion, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, I've read the transcripts.
Judge, I'm gonna object. This goes into narration.
Right, all I can say is you try to specifically answer the question.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Continue.
Have you read transcripts?
I have, in their entirety,
And what transcripts are you referring to?
of the audio tapes that were provided, well, to you by the prosecution via the police from their undercover investigation.
And was there anything on the audio tapes suggesting kill, harm, hurt Megan or McDaniel?
No. In fact, 177 times during these conversations do I say the words, I don't want to harm or hurt or kill anybody.
Okay. Are you, sir, how did you get into a relationship with Motaz?
I received a phone call from him sometime in late January or early February of 2017.
And what was the content of that phone call?
Judge, I'm gonna object. This calls for hearsay.
Sustain.
Motaz during the conversation?
I told him that I would appreciate to meet with him. He had details of what had been going on from a woman named Laura Thurlow, and she had told me that he was going to call me, and he did.
And Laura Thurlow testified in this court a couple of days ago, right?
Yes, sir.
And during the course of your relationship with Laura Thurlow, did you hear any testimony about Megan being placed in a car under sedation by way of some type of a needle that you would provide?
I did.
And did you hear her testify that the purpose of that was for you to be able to get control of the situation so that you could be with Megan?
I did, but I deny ever making those suggestions to Laura Thurlow.
You deny what?
Ever making those suggestions to Laura Thurlow.
Suggestion relating to the syringe
Absolutely.
and suggestions relating to you wanting to be back in touch with, or back as a couple with Megan?
I do not deny those suggestions.
You do not deny them?
No, but I deny the suggestion that I ever asked Laura Thurlow to somehow inject Megan Varakis with a needle to sedate her. In fact, those were suggestions from Laura Thurlow to me, and I was very emphatic that I did not want that to happen.
All right. Your feelings about Megan. You love her?
I did.
Did you love her through this period of time that you've heard testimony about, you know, having her and McDaniel killed?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think that when you give your heart to somebody for such a long time, that part of you always still loves them. You know, when we broke up, it was, you know, fairly volatile breakup and a surprise to me. And after some time, I realized that there was no getting back with her, and I think that, you know, I had to accept that.
But you tried.
I did try to get back with her, yes.
I mean, you've seen these emails,
Absolutely.
and the emails all consist of your love for her
They do.
and your desire to get back together again.
They do.
Did she respond to that?
Not so much, just asked me to sort of leave her alone.
Why
And
didn't you leave her alone?
In hindsight, I, you know, probably should have, but I just didn't understand how you could become so entwined in someone's life and just walk away so easily from their life, especially considering we were really happy. I know that she testified.
I'm going to object, this goes into narration.
This is fine.
She testified as to what?
That it had been a long time
Form, Judge?
Yeah, it's awfully broad.
I'm sorry?
It's awfully broad question. She testified to a whole lot of things. So
Yes.
if you want to be specific,
Yeah.
I'll be entertained.
Did you, what was my next question? Is there a particular reason why you would not leave her alone?
I think it was a multitude of reasons. I can't put it into one reason.
Would you categorize your position as being desperate for her?
I could categorize it that way. I think to answer your previous question, I thought that she really loved me the way that she said she did, and I couldn't imagine ever walking away from her the way she walked away from me, just like that.
Any further questions at this time? Michael Kubosh,
Yes, sir.
did you ever visit his office?
I did.
And what was the purpose of that visit?
To have a discussion with him about a man that I had come to know as the name Zach, who has been identified in court as Motaz Aziz.
All right. And why did you want to have discussions with Kubosh about that, about Zach?
I was under the impression that if Motaz Aziz ever disappeared or could not be reached, that Michael Kubosh would be able to would know where he was.
And why did you need Zach?
He was already actively portraying a private investigator for me, and he had received a lot of money and all of a sudden just disappeared for a while. Must have been more than about 10, 12 days. So I reached out to Michael Kubosh to see if he might be able to locate him.
And what was the purpose of hiring Zach?
To at first try to find out where Megan was after we first broke up.
Where she was physically?
Physically and, yeah.
All right. And thereafter?
He had convinced me that he would be able to, at first, talk to her. He said he was skilled in negotiation. He had been in the military for that, interrogation, that kind of stuff, and that he would try to broker a meeting between the two of us where we could sit down and sort of talk about what had happened and why it had happened, and give me a chance to try to reconcile a relationship.
Were you ever supposed to meet Zach at the Hotel Zaza?
Yes.
And when was that?
That had to be in sometime late January of 2017.
Right. Did you in fact meet at the hotel?
No, I went to the hotel, but I sat outside per his instructions for several hours without ever hearing from him, so I went home.
Okay. You've heard Laura Thurlow talk about you basically watching and following her movements and things of that fashion. Is that correct?
I did hear that, yes.
Sir?
I did hear that, yes.
And was that her description about your activities during that 3-day period, was that basically accurate?
It was not totally accurate, no.
And what is accurate about her testimony?
I did drop Laura off near the hotel. She said that she would go in to try to talk, as she testified, waiting for Laura to come out. We had gone back the next day again, as she testified too, but it wasn't as if we were hanging around the hotel for hours at a time. It was a very brief time that we were there. We spent most of our time at a restaurant together. She testified we went there to eat.
All right. At this time, Your Honor, may I check to see if there are other witnesses in the hallway?
Your associate can't?
Sure.
I think we have an answer.
He's right
Mr.
there.
J-
Is he here or not?
Yes, sir. He's sitting in the stands, sir.
So he's in violation of the rule, is that?
He just walked in, sir.
Okay.
That's why I stopped talking. I apologize.
Your Honor, we would ask this testimony be interrupted and have this other individual testify.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have an agreement with the defense. We were waiting on a witness for the defense that just got here, and instead of sitting here for 45 minutes while we waited, I let Mr. Farnham put on his client with the understanding that once that witness got here, we would allow Mr. Jacob to take his seat and then proceed with this other witness. So with that, let's take about 2 minutes, please, and I'll have you right back with you.
All rise.
I may have one moment.
Oh.
Testimony before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Thank you.
Brian Bruckner, it's B-R-I-A-N, and then B-R-U-C-K-N-E-R, Bruckner.
One moment. Put this to Jacob back on the stand.
Okay. Please.
I'll sign it first.
Ladies and gentlemen, change of plans, we thought it would be best to have a continuation of the chain that we're following now instead of breaking it up. So everyone has agreed that we'll continue on with the testimony of Mr. Jacob. Mr. Carter, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Jacob, concerning the Z's, when did you first meet with him?
I can't recall the exact date, but it was sometime in late January of last year.
And there were phone calls that preceded your meeting with him, correct?
Yes,
And who placed those calls?
he did.
And why did he call you?
To a discussion he wanted to have about a problem that I had.
And what was the problem that you had?
I had broken up, or my girlfriend and I had broken up, and she had sort of disappeared, and I didn't know where she was. I couldn't get in contact with her.
Megan?
Megan Vericus, yes.
Were you with Valerie at the time? Being where?
We met at a restaurant over in the Galleria called Del Frisco's.
All right. And I believe you testified that that was a meeting that lasted for an hour and a half, 2 hours?
I didn't testify to how long that meeting lasted.
All right. How long did it last?
About 45 minutes.
And what was the context of that meeting?
Aziz, or Zach, however you want to refer to him from now on,
Let's
going
call him
forward.
Zach.
Okay, Zach had obtained some preliminary information on Megan and on my family that he sort of showed me. He had extensive files on me and my family and stuff about Megan and Megan's family.
And who initiated that effort on the part of Zach to get that information?
During our initial conversation, he had asked me some names, my name, full name, Megan's full name, my family's full name. He took it upon himself. I don't know how he got the information. I think he's got a background in computer science, and he did some internet stuff. I don't know how he obtained the information.
But he obtained information that confronted you at the time you had a visit, a meeting with him at the restaurant.
Yeah, looking back and from what I know now, it was to appear to be very credible as a private investigator.
Credible or not credible?
To be very credible, he was presenting himself as somebody who did their homework.
All right. And did you ask him to do anything on your behalf?
Yes, I asked him to find out where Megan was.
All right. And did you pay him any money for that?
Not that evening, I did not.
Did you later pay him money for that?
Yes, the next day.
How much did you pay him?
I believe it was $2,500 is what he asked for initially.
All right. Was he successful in finding out where Megan was?
He portrayed that he was.
I'm sorry?
He portrayed that he was.
And how did he portray that he was?
He said that he knew where she was staying. He said that he knew, about where she worked and whatnot, and that he'd observed her at work. I had asked him if, he had talked to her, and he said no.
And what was the purpose of you wanting him to locate Megan?
Initially,
Asked and answered.
well, initially,
Do you want to restate it? I think you have.
Sure, Judge. Was he successful in locating Megan?
he portrayed that he was. In hindsight, the answer is no. He was making everything up. Initially, I had asked him to find Megan. I was worried about her. She had no access to real money, and
Object to the narrative.
Sustained. Question and answer, please.
Did he found her, correct?
he portrayed that he had found her.
All right. Was there any money that ever exchanged hands after that meeting between you and Megan?
Not directly.
How about indirectly?
I had assumed there was through Aziz.
And what did you give Aziz? What supports your assumption that he gave money to Megan?
$10,000 in cash,
When was that delivered?
sometime in February.
How much time after the meeting at the restaurant?
A couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't remember exactly. Again, these meetings never actually occurred with Megan. He made me believe that they did.
And so you heard testimony from Zach,
I did.
and you heard that he in turn spent the money you gave him.
I did.
And how much was that?
He gave a quote, I think, around $9,980 or thereabouts. But he took more.
Anybody else that you, I'm sorry,
He took more than that.
is there anybody else that you know that, that was aware of this meeting and the delivery of cash to Zach?
Valerie McDaniel was.
And Valerie was present?
She was not present at the initial meeting, no.
All right, how did Valerie McDaniel know about this transfer of money to Zach to find Megan?
After Megan and I had separated, Megan and I didn't have a lot of friends here in Houston. We had a few friends. In fact, Megan and I hung out with Valerie a lot, and I had called Valerie and told her we had broken up.
Non-responsive.
I'm getting there.
Let's get there.
Okay. Valerie was somebody I spoke to about what was going on in my life at that immediate time. I told her, what was going on and that I was hiring a private investigator and whatnot. And
Now, what was that? You were talking about Valerie.
I was telling Valerie this stuff as a friend. At first, yeah, I was telling her what was going on.
What was her reaction to the fact that you were trying to find Megan?
At first, she was, supported me on that.
She what?
She supported me initially on that.
All right. How did that change? If it did.
It did. It changed dramatically. Valerie had told me that she was waiting for.
Object, this calls for hearsay.
Let me answer.
I sustained it.
I'll answer it a different way.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Tell me about any interaction with McDaniel, either yourself or through Zach. Ever any?
Which McDaniel are you referring to?
I'm sorry?
Which McDaniel are you referring to?
Mac McDaniel.
I'm not aware of any interaction with myself with Mac McDaniel except what I've already described. The only thing that I'm aware of is at some point Aziz called.
Gentlemen, object, this calls for hearsay. And is
Sustained.
Did Aziz ever call anybody?
Yes,
Did he in fact call McDaniel?
I believe so. Yes,
All right, that was not in your presence.
did not happen in my presence.
Are you guilty of solicitation of capital murder
Absolutely not.
of either McDaniel or Megan?
Neither of them.
I'd pass you for cross-examination.
From the state, please.
Mr. Jacob, you like to be in control, don't you?
That's not my opinion, it's somebody else's.
Well, do you?
Who doesn't like to be in control of their life?
Let me talk to you about Megan. You told your attorney on direct examination that you were desperate for Megan, right?
I guess you can characterize it as that.
Well, I didn't say that. Y'all said that. Did you agree with the statement that you were desperate for Megan?
Yes.
And that's because you were in love with Megan, right?
Yes.
And at the time that you all got into that fight, y'all had been in a relationship for a couple of years, correct?
Yes.
And she actually moved to Houston for you.
Yes.
And y'all were sharing an apartment.
Yes.
And the night of the fight, isn't it true that the fight wasn't about finances at all?
I told you what it was about.
Isn't it true that she was the breadwinner in the family?
That's not entirely true.
Okay, well, you'd agree with me that you worked for Methodist as a contract worker, and that ended in approximately March of 2016, correct?
That's false.
You disagree with that?
Yes.
So if I have a piece of paper terminating your contract with Methodist dated March of 2016, you disagree with that?
I was paid until the end of May of 2016.
So we'll go with May for you, May 2016, and then the next time that you start bringing in any kind of money, you'd agree with me, is when you start to work for Charge Financial, correct?
No, that's not true.
Did you start working for Charge Financial in October of 2017, of 2016?
No. Well, a little later, maybe.
November?
November, December time.
And things were so bad with your finances that your mom actually gave you money to pay for things, didn't she?
Yes.
She helped you pay your child support.
No.
Your mom never paid your child support for you?
She may have given checks to me to pay it, but I always paid it myself to my wife.
The money was
Ex-wife.
from your mom, though, wasn't it?
It could be characterized as that, yes.
Well, if it's your mother's money and she gives it to you to pay the child support, it's coming from your mom, correct?
It could be considered more like family money.
Family money. So was it family money when your mom pays your cell phone bill?
She pays all of our cell phone bills.
Is it family money when your mom helps you out when you need groceries?
Yes.
So when you were upset with Megan from taking money from the account, that's really kind of silly, right? Because she was the only one that was really putting money in the account, correct?
No.
She had a job at the time, right?
Yes.
She worked at the hotel, correct?
Yes.
She was the one who paid your rent.
She wrote the checks for the rent, yes.
She paid the rent from the money she made at the hotel, correct?
Incorrect.
She paid for your dog.
She bought the dog. Actually, she never paid for the dog.
She paid for your groceries.
She went to the grocery store, yes.
She paid for the groceries.
If you mean she went to the store and used our debit card to buy the groceries, then that's correct, yes.
Okay. And during the time that Megan lived down here in Houston, she was always employed, correct?
That's not correct.
And she was always bringing in money to your household, wasn't
That's
she?
not correct.
And would you agree with me that you all had many fights about the fact that she was frustrated that you didn't have a job?
You can characterize it as that, yes.
That she was frustrated?
Yes.
And that she was frustrated that she felt like she was the one that was paying for everything, correct?
Those were her opinions, yes.
Okay. And she was frustrated because she felt like you were sitting home at the apartment all day and she was the one at work bringing home money, correct?
If she wants to characterize it as that, yes.
She expressed that to you, correct?
A couple of times, yes.
And that's one of the reasons why you guys would fight, right? Because she felt like the division of what you all were responsible for wasn't fair.
That was her opinion.
Okay? And she expressed that opinion to you.
Sure.
And so when she broke up with you that night, she left you after you put your hand on her face, didn't you?
I never put my hand on her face.
So when you do you remember having a conversation with Officer Jack with the Houston Police Department?
I had a conversation with someone from the Houston Police Department. I don't remember the exact name.
And when you talked with that police officer with the Houston Police Department, did he actually call you to get a statement from you about what had occurred with the assault between you and Megan?
I guess you could characterize it as a statement, yes.
And did you give him a statement?
I did.
And do you recall telling him that the only thing that you did was put your hand over her mouth to keep her from screaming?
I did say that, but I didn't say I put my hand on her mouth.
You never said that you put your hand on her mouth.
I didn't say I put it on her mouth.
Okay, what did you say?
I said I put my hand over her mouth. In front of, I meant in front of, like this. I never put my hand on physically on her face.
Okay. So you disagree with the fact that you put her, when she says you put hands on her, you disagree with that?
Absolutely.
But you'd agree with me that after that night, just like you said, just like that, she was gone, right?
Yes.
And she didn't want anything to do with you after that, did she?
I'm not particularly sure you could characterize it as that.
Well,
She ran to my mother's house to spend the night, and then she went to my family's house to stay with them.
and that made you mad, didn't it?
Not particularly.
Didn't you express to your sister-in-law that you were pretty frustrated that she was housing your girlfriend?
I don't recall when I did that.
Were you mad that, did you ask your sister-in-law, Leslie Jacob? Do you know who
I do.
Leslie Jacob is?
I do.
And did you ask Leslie Jacob to help assist you in trying to get Megan back?
I did.
And did you exchange a series of text messages with Leslie in an attempt to reconcile with Megan?
I believe I did.
And in one of those text messages, didn't you communicate to Leslie that if she wasn't going to fix this, that she needed to get Megan out? Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 75. This is an exchange of text messages, and I want you to read right here. Yeah, read it to yourself. Got it?
Yeah.
Here you go. Recall telling your sister-in-law that she needed to fix things between you and Megan?
I don't recall exactly telling her that, but something similar, yes.
And did you become upset that they were keeping her at their home?
Not particularly at first.
Well, eventually did you become upset?
I don't remember my exact mindset.
Okay, well, do you recall saying if she won't even consider taking you back?
Is that an evidence?
It is not, Judge.
So you're testifying from that?
No, Judge, I'm just
Solid
at-
evidence? So
Well, I'm happy to state off for State's Exhibit 75, tender to opposing counsel.
I'm sorry, Mr. Horn.
Objection, Your Honor.
Thank you so much. State 75 is admitted. Continue, please.
Do you recall texting your sister-in-law, Leslie, if she won't consider taking me back, kick that bitch out and I will stay there. I'm family.
I don't recall exactly when I sent the text, but it sounds like something I would have sent.
Okay. And because you were upset that they were taking care of your girlfriend, correct?
I don't think I was upset they were taking care of my girlfriend, but I had moved out of our apartment, and I would have liked to have stayed at my brother and sister-in-law's house instead of a woman that wanted nothing to do with me.
And your brother actually didn't let you stay at his house, did he?
No, Megan was staying there.
At all. So after this fight, did you stay at Adam's house at all?
I didn't ask him to stay there after that.
That wasn't my question. Did you stay at Adam's house after this happened? Yes or no?
No.
Did you stay at your mom's house for an extended period of time after this happened? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And during this time, like you said, you were desperate for Megan, right? You wanted to get back with her,
I did.
and you took a lot of things, and you took a lot of steps in order to try and reconcile with her, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Now, during this time when you're so desperate for Megan, wouldn't you agree with me that you moved in with Valerie McDaniel just 7 days after your fight with Megan?
I don't think I moved in with her 7 days after my fight with Megan. She let me stay there for a couple of nights, on and off.
Isn't it true that you all started having sex 7 days after you and Megan broke up?
I don't remember exactly how many days after it was.
Well, do you recall communicating to Valerie McDaniel at some point in your relationship that you all had been sleeping together for 44 days straight? Do you remember sending her that text message?
I don't remember sending her the exact number of days it was.
Judge, at this time, State Offer States Exhibit number 76, an exchange of text messages, and I'll tender to opposing counsel for any objection.
No objection.
I take it we skipped several on purpose.
Yes, Judge.
It's admitted. Thank you.
Let me ask you, do you recall back on March the 2nd of 2017 texting Valerie McDaniel saying, did you know that you have been laid 44 straight days in a row now?
I don't recall the exact date or what I wrote, but it sounds like something I would have communicated to Valerie.
And if that's correct, you'd agree with me that that would have put you sleeping with Valerie McDaniel just 7 days after you and Megan broke up, correct?
If the math is correct, yes.
Okay. So when you tell the members of this jury that you're heartsick over Megan, that's not really true, is it? Because it sure didn't take you long to move on, did it?
Matters of the heart and how you feel are subject to the way you feel at a moment. I mean, you're asking me to get up here and say that I'm some womanizer. That's fine. You can characterize me as that. It doesn't make me guilty of solicitation of capital murder. I have no problem sitting here and saying that I slept with Valerie 7 days after Megan and I broke up. But I'm not on trial for being a womanizer. I'm on trial for solicitation of capital murder. So you can assassinate my character all you want up here. It doesn't make me guilty of what you've charged me with.
I appreciate that, Mr. Jacob, but my question was, isn't it true that just 7 days after you and Megan broke up that you were sleeping with Valerie McDaniel?
I think he answered.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so when Laura Thurlow was testifying, do you recall your lawyer asking her a lot of questions about your behavior at the time that you were having her help you with things?
Yes.
And you recall her characterizing your behavior as bizarre?
Yes.
You mentioned that Valerie, when your lawyer on direct examination asked you who Valerie McDaniel was, you mentioned that she was your girlfriend / your common law wife, right?
We could be characterized as common law married, yes.
And it was important for you to be characterized as common law married when all of this went down, wasn't it?
It's just a reality of what the situation was.
Right. Would you agree with me that you had numerous conversations with your mother about the fact that it was really important that you and Valerie be considered common law married?
You'd have to refresh my memory, but yes, I remember something like that.
And do you remember telling your mother that she needs to make sure that your belongings stay over at Valerie's condo because when this trial comes up, you need to be able to say that you two are common law married?
I don't believe it was in reference to the trial. I believe it was a reference to the fact that I was not on bond at the time, and Valerie had bonded out before her death, and I wanted to be able to go live with my wife if I was given a bond.
Well, didn't you say when she takes the fifth, she'll be able to say we're common law married? Wasn't that your concern?
Not particularly. I may have said that, but I was more concerned that if I got out on bond, I'd be able to go back to my home.
Because that's the only place she had to go, right?
It's where I would have wanted to been.
And when Mac McDaniel found out that you were actually staying over at Valerie's house, you knew he was upset about that, didn't you?
Of course, I knew he was upset about that. He blamed me for their divorce.
And when he found out that you were over there, you knew that he and Valerie came to an agreement that as long as Natalie was over there, you weren't supposed to be over there, were you?
I was never made aware of an agreement between the two of them.
So didn't know that you weren't supposed to be there when Natalie was there?
No, I did not.
Valerie never told you that she was upset with Mac because he didn't want her daughter around you?
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure, Valerie never told you about the agreement that she had with Mac.
Not that I knew of.
You mentioned that Mac was upset with you about the divorce, is that right?
That's my understanding, yes. I never spoke to him about it.
And you know that if Valerie was in violation of some sort of agreement with Mac, that Natalie would have to go stay with Mac, correct?
I'm not a family lawyer. I can't answer that question.
Well, could you answer whether or not you were being allowed to stay there when Natalie was there? Did you know that?
I assumed that I was allowed to stay there. I was living at the apartment.
If Natalie was there and you weren't supposed to be there, you would have no place to go, right?
You're asking me to give you a hypothetical answer to a hypothetical question.
Well, didn't it frustrate you that Mac didn't want you to stay at the apartment with Valerie?
I could have cared less what Mac thought.
Didn't it frustrate you that Mac was making a big deal about this situation and you were going to have no place to go?
I could have cared less what Mac thought.
And isn't it true that you started to egg Valerie on and feed her information about her ex-husband, didn't you?
No.
Do you recall in the recordings, both at the Olive Garden and at Willowick, you calling Mac a piece of shit over and over and over?
I do.
Okay. Let's talk about the Olive Garden. First off, you mentioned early on direct examination that one of the things that you were concerned about out on the balcony was that you were scared when Javier showed you his gun. Is that right?
That's true.
You were fearful about that, right?
Yes.
And that's why you started talking about Guantanamo Bay with him.
Yes.
Okay, but isn't it true that over at the Olive Garden, you also talked about Guantanamo Bay?
I don't remember exactly what I
So
thought.
if on the recording, though, you're talking about Guantanamo Bay at the Olive Garden, you wouldn't have any reason to disagree with the recording, would you, Mr. Jacob?
No.
Okay. And you never saw Javier with a gun at the Olive Garden, did you?
No.
You weren't fearful of him at the Olive Garden, were you?
Slightly.
Well, you're in a public place, right?
Yes.
And it's your...
Prior to our meeting as a Navy SEAL and somebody who was not to be messed with.
And you went there to meet with him, didn't you?
Yes.
And before you met with him, you had a phone conversation with Zach, correct?
I had several phone conversations with Mac prior to meeting with him.
And in one of those phone conversations that we heard in court, you told Zach, is he going to take care of both problems, correct?
I believe so.
Both problems. Valerie there, correct?
The four of us were there, yes.
Okay. And when you step outside and you begin speaking with Officer Duran, you'd agree with me that we hear you on the video ask him, are you a cop?
I did.
You were concerned whether or not he was a police officer, weren't you?
Probably.
Well, concerned enough to ask him the question, right?
Yes.
And while you're at Olive Garden, you mentioned that Valerie has a conversation with Javier, and you know nothing about what was said, right?
No, I do not. I did not at the time. I know now.
Well, you knew then too, didn't you?
No.
Well, because do you recall coming back to the table at the Olive Garden and Javier telling you she wants her ex-husband dead?
I don't really recall that.
Do you recall Javier saying to you, so she's decided that she wants her ex to be gone?
I think he did say something to that effect, but he didn't use the word dead or killed.
That was my question. Do you recall Javier saying, so she's decided that she wants her ex to be gone?
I think if that's what you said, it said on the tape, and that's what it said.
Okay. And then your response was, I got it.
If you say so.
And then when just a few sentences later, your statement to Javier is, I can give you $2,500 a week for 4 weeks. That's probably the best and the easiest. Do you remember saying that, Mr. Jacob?
Something to that effect, yes.
So to tell the members of this jury that you didn't know what agreement Valerie and Javier had come up with, that's not exactly true, is it?
I knew about the agreement for the money, of course.
And what it was for, too.
I just told you I didn't know what it was for.
Well, do you recall that undercover officer trying to clarify what kind of car Mac drove?
I do.
And you clarified for him?
I don't think I clarified for him. I think she did.
Didn't recall Valerie saying a Land Cruiser and Javier saying a Land Cruiser, and then you say, is that what type he's got?
Well, I think that your question would then actually depict a situation where I didn't know what kind of car he drove.
Were you clarifying what kind of car that Mac McDaniel drove?
To myself, yes.
Okay. And do you recall right after that, Javier saying a brand new Land Cruiser, carjack him, put a bullet in his head, throw him on the street, and make sure he's gone. Make sure he's dead for sure, and then park his truck in one of those apartment complexes. You know, one of those shitty apartment complexes. When can I get the first payment? You recall Javier saying that to you?
Yeah, at the Olive Garden?
Yes, sir.
If you said that's what he said on the tape, then that's what he said.
That's what he said. And in direct response to that, you say, I can give you $2,500 a week for 4 weeks. That's probably the best and easiest.
And that's the
Correct?
chronological order it happened in.
Right?
If you say that's the chronological order it happened in, then I have to say yes.
Okay, so you're agreeing to give him $2,500 just after he tells you, I'm going to put a bullet in his head and throw him on the street.
If that's what you say.
Well, that's in the recording. It's not what I say. It's what Javier and you said, right?
I guess.
You kept saying on direct examination that you never used the words hurt or asked for anybody to be killed, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you didn't want anyone to be kidnapped either, did you?
No.
Okay, you said that on direct examination. You said, I don't want anybody to be hurt. I never asked for anybody to be hurt or kidnapped, correct?
True.
But that's not true, right? Because you told Javier, snatch her, put her in a room, and tell her if she doesn't fucking leave, I'm going to kill her parents, right?
If that's what you say, I said.
Did you say it, Mr. Jacob?
Sure.
Did you say it?
Yes, I guess if that's what the tapes say.
And when you say snatch her, that's kidnapping, right?
If that's what you wanted to define it as.
Well, how else would you define snatch?
I don't know. I left it up to him how to do that stuff.
That's certainly not her willing to go with you, right?
We were just talking about stuff at the time. I left the possible scenarios. I wasn't giving him any directions.
So when you're telling him snatch her and put her in a hotel room, you're not giving him any directions.
I think I put it as, so what are you going to do? It was a question, actually, that I asked him.
No, actually, the statement you made was snatch her, put her in a room, and if she doesn't fucking leave, tell her you're going to kill her parents.
I think I posed it as a question to him.
Does that sound like directions to you?
If it's posed in a question, I don't think it's directions.
What kind of question is that?
I don't know.
So you want to know if this private investigator could snatch her?
I think we were just having a conversation.
Did you not want anybody hurt when you said, inject her with potassium chloride, stop her heart, untraceable?
I said that was something you could do. I didn't say that for him to do that.
You'd agree with me that if you injected someone with potassium chloride and stopped their heart, that it would hurt them?
Yes.
It would kill them?
Yes.
You knew that as a doctor.
Yes.
Did you recall telling the undercover officer, if those options don't work, I don't give a fuck, then you got to do what you got to do because my survival is more important?
Yes.
You said that, right?
I did.
And you meant that, didn't you?
At the time, I don't know what I meant.
Well, what you meant was that you were upset that Megan had filed assault family member charges against you, weren't you?
anybody would be upset about having a false police report filed against them.
So is that a yes, Mr. Jacob? Were you upset?
Of course I was.
And were you a little bit frustrated that if that assault family member case stuck against you, that you weren't going to be able to try and reinvent your medical career, correct?
Yes.
It was certainly a hindrance to that, wasn't it?
Yep.
And if you're convicted of assault family member and stalking a felony, you're not going to be able to practice medicine anymore, are you?
Most likely not.
And medicine's pretty important to you, isn't it?
It is.
And so the fact that you might not be able to try and reinvent your medical career was upsetting to you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And that assault family member case was what stood between, in your mind, what stood between you and your medical license.
It was a hindrance.
It was a hindrance, right? And if that assault family member case went away, then you were all good, right?
I don't know if I was all good, but it would certainly be better than having it.
It certainly wouldn't be in the way of you being a doctor, right?
If it didn't exist, it's not going to be in the way of anything.
Okay. And initially, you were upset when she obtained that protective order too, weren't you?
Which protective order are you talking about? The temporary one or the one we agreed to, the no contact order?
The temporary one.
Well, that came with the charges for assault and violent.
You were concerned that it might be public record that you had been asked to stay away from her, weren't you?
Now you're talking about something different.
Well, let's talk about the 2-year protective order. Were you concerned that it was made public?
It was agreed upon that it would be sealed.
And it wasn't, right?
No, it was not.
And you're frustrated about that, weren't you?
Well, typically when you're told by the law that they're going to do something and they don't, it's frustrating.
And you were frustrated, weren't you?
Of course I was.
Okay. And again, with a 2-year protective order in place, that affects your ability to get employment, doesn't it?
I don't necessarily think it does or does not. I was already employed.
You would agree with me that most employers probably are going to be a little bit cautious about hiring someone who has a 2-year protective order in place on them, right?
That's not for me to speculate. I already had a job. It didn't really concern me about my present employment, which is why I signed it voluntarily.
There was no, it wasn't a contested hearing, was it?
No.
No. In fact, you all scratched out that language and all came to an agreement that you'd stay away from Megan.
It was a
didn't you?
2-year joint no contact order, yes.
Okay. And when you told Megan that you were frustrated that she got a protective order, which protective order were you talking about? Were you talking about the temporary one or the 2-year one?
I don't remember.
But you sent her an email after one of them went in place telling her, did you really get a protective order, didn't you?
You have to give me some dates and I could probably clarify that for you.
Judge, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Jacob, I'm going to show you what's been entered into evidence in State's Exhibit 49, if you'll take a look at that for me.
This would be Thursday for the 29th. I can't recall which one I was a little upset. I was upset about it.
You're upset that a lower middle class girl from Pittsburgh had brought charges against you, weren't you?
It had nothing to do with where she was from.
Well, you mentioned it several times to the undercover officer, didn't you?
You're asking me two different questions.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you, did you mention to the undercover officer that Megan was a lower middle class girl from Pittsburgh?
That wasn't your question you asked me before. You asked me if I was upset that she ordered that characterization and she filed a protective order against me. So it's two questions. The first question was I upset that she had a protective order against me? The answer is yes. Her upbringing had nothing to do with that whatsoever.
Her upbringing was an issue to you, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't actually.
You felt like, how dare this lower middle class citizen bring charges against Dr. McDaniel or Dr. Jacob?
Not necessarily. I was more upset with her the fact that she lied to me about her education. She comes from a very, very nice family.
That's not what you told the undercover officer, is it?
I think I did at some point. I said that I like her family a lot.
You also told undercover officer, these are just lower class middle girls from Pittsburgh. You said that, right?
About characterizing Megan and one of her friends.
Correct. Let's talk about the last few phone conversations that you had with Officer Duran. May I approach, Judge?
Do you need his back? I'll just give it back to her.
You can just get the court report.
I'm going to show you what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit number 22. Do you remember Officer Duran sending you this photograph? Died, correct?
Yes.
And it was your belief that your Megan Veracos was somewhere with duct tape wrapped around her mouth, right?
Yes.
And in seeing this picture, you'd agree with me that no time did you tell Officer Duran, whoop, time out, stop, this has gone too far, I don't want any part of this. You never said that, did you?
Not those exact words. I did not.
You didn't tell him stop?
I tried to delay him.
Mr. Jacob, my question is, did you tell Officer Duran stop?
No.
Did you tell Officer Duran, I don't like where this is going?
Not those exact words.
You didn't use those words, did you?
No.
No. In fact, you are under the belief, while you're talking to Officer Duran, that Megan is somewhere in this city tied up, bound, duct taped, and you're having conversations with Officer Duran during that, right?
Yes.
And at this point, you also believe that Mac McDaniel is dead.
Yes.
You believe that Officer Duran has taken care of Mac McDaniel, don't you?
That's what he told us, yes.
He told you that at the Willowwick apartment, right?
Yes.
And he told you that as you guys went out on the balcony, didn't he?
Either the balcony, yes, somewhere in the apartment. He told us about it.
And after Officer Duran tells you that he's taking care of Mac McDaniel, Valerie actually excuses herself and goes back inside the condo, doesn't she?
Yes.
And that's when you stay out on the patio with Officer Duran, correct?
Yep.
And this man that you're so afraid of, you offered him a beer when he came in, didn't you?
Yeah, I think that, I don't remember which conversation it was, but yes, at some point we did have alcoholic drinks on the balcony.
And this man that you're so afraid of, you actually offered to let him have sushi with you guys too, right?
I think so, yes.
And this man that you're so afraid of, you actually told him that you felt like you had become friends with him and you wanted to stay in contact with him so he should touch base with you in the future, right?
I don't think it was out of so much comfort as I was. Do you want me to continue, or?
Go ahead.
I'm not really sure I wanted to be friends with him. I really didn't know how to react around him.
Did you offer to help Officer Duran inject Megan with a syringe?
I think I did.
Did you offer to help Officer Duran inject Megan with potassium chloride?
I think I did.
Did you?
Yes.
And you know as a doctor that potassium chloride will kill someone.
Yes.
And so by helping him inject Megan with potassium chloride, it would result in her death.
That would be the logical conclusion.
It would be the conclusion.
Yes. There's an explanation why I offered
One
that.
second, Mr. Jacob. The night that you were arrested, you recall officers coming to the condo where you're staying with Valerie?
Which arrest are you referring to?
When Sergeant Quinn came to the condominium to do the arrest, do you recall when he came there that night?
Yes.
And do you recall walking in to the living area of the condominium complex and being told that Mac had been killed in an apparent robbery.
Yes.
And when you learn that information, do you turn to Sergeant Quinn or any of the other officers there and go, you know what, I have information for you, you need to hear this? Do you say that to them?
No.
Do you feign surprise at the idea that Mac McDaniel is dead?
I think I did.
You did, right? Because that was part of the act that you all were putting on for the police that night, right?
I wasn't really sure how to react.
Well, you certainly had to be careful how you reacted, because at that point you believed that you had paid an undercover officer money to kill Mac, right?
No.
And it was important for you not to let the officers know that you'd been involved in his death, right?
No.
You didn't tell the officers that you had paid Officer Duran $2,500 to take care of a problem, did you?
I absolutely did not pay Officer Duran $2,500.
You didn't tell officers that you paid Officer Duran $1,800, did you?
No.
You didn't volunteer that information to the officers that night, did you?
No, I did not.
Instead, when they asked you if you knew of any problems that Mac had, you said, I didn't even really know the guy. I think I met him once, right?
I did. That's the truth.
Okay. And
They didn't ask me if I knew of any problems he had. They asked me if I knew the man.
what was your response?
That I barely met him once, or I met him once.
Right. And you also let the officers know, look, we've been here all night,
I did.
and we've been watching movies here all day.
I did.
And so you'd agree with me that that's giving the officers an explanation as to your whereabouts and what you all had been doing that day, correct?
They asked us if we had any information. I said we've been at the apartment all day.
You volunteered that to them, right?
In a response to their...
Hey, officers, I got to tell you something. This guy has my girlfriend tied up across town. Did you tell him that?
We were arrested after the undercover officer had already told me he'd shot Megan in the head twice. So why was I going to tell them something that I knew that was no longer relevant? At least that's what I was portrayed to me.
So you felt like at that point Megan was dead,
I was told she was.
and you believed she was.
Absolutely.
You don't think that was something you maybe should have shared with those officers that night?
I'm not really sure what I should have done. I was in shock all around about what was happening.
Judge, may I have a moment?
Yes, you may. Briefly, please.
Mr. Jacob, you needed an email to be sent from Megan to you, didn't you?
I didn't need to have an email sent.
You certainly wanted it, right?
Yes.
If you felt like it would make your criminal case go away, didn't you?
A violation of the no contact. Yes, but still alive.
You were.
I never asked them to take her out of state.
You didn't ask her to be taken out of state.
I was told that's where she wanted to go.
Did you ask that? That could be kind of problematic. Do you remember that in the recording?